What's up, everybody? WaldoDude here. Today I want to talk to you guys a little bit about what makes COD COD. So I published an article on my website a few weeks back, and I basically started to delve into this stuff. What makes COD the game that it is? What nuances separate COD from some of those previous FPS titles that came out before it? What is it about the game that both drives people crazy and allows it to sell, a billion copies in 16 days? As someone who was an extremely avid competitive FPS player for many, many years before COD came out, COD to me was unfortunately in many ways it was a good thing for the game industry because it exposed so many more people, but unfortunately was a downfall for the FPS community, in my opinion. So today I'm going to talk to you about why I think that's the case. The first reason, I think the easiest reason to point out that most people will be able to understand would be consistency. So the single greatest factor that COD has both going for it and against it at the same time is consistency. It's what allows somebody to go on a 30-40 kill streak one round and then the next round barely finish going with a positive KD. It's what gives people the thoughts or ideas that they may or may not be a good player, and that I'll just keep playing another round because at any given moment you could simply change from going on a negative KD to quickly getting 15-20 kills in a row, especially with some of those kill streaks that are out there. And when that happens, it kind of hooks you in. It gives you that perception that you're not as bad as you may really be. But I think most importantly is the way that I see it. There are no good or bad players in COD. The difference between someone who is really good and really bad in COD is not nearly as big of a difference as there were in games, say, closer to 6, 7, 8 years ago. So basically a good and a bad player in COD are closer to here and here, whereas earlier FPS titles, the difference between a great and a bad player was, you were miles. They didn't measure it in distance, they measured it in time. You stood on the shoulders of giants, and poor players had absolutely no chance of doing anything to you, and that's largely why COD came out and why it's so successful today. KD, as I said, briefly mentioned before, is one of those indicators. So someone who might be a great player in COD would probably be averaging about a 3-to-1 KD with a high score per minute. A 3-to-1 KD is that's I just want to let that thought of a 3-to-1 KD detonate in your guys' heads for a few minutes there. A 3-to-1 KD, a 1-to-1 KD is just straight up 50-50. A 2-to-1 is barely better than 50-50, and a 3-to-1 is just a small improvement over that. If a great player is averaging a 3-to-1 KD and a high score per minute, what is a bad player averaging? A 2-to-1 KD with an okay score per minute, a 2.5? If some of the best players out there are having difficulty going above consistently, and that's the key word, is consistency, consistently pulling a 3-to-1 KD, I feel like I should just turn the video off and end it right here. If, for instance, you want to look at games like, say, some of the earlier Quake titles or Battlefield, things like that, KDs were, say, both earlier Battlefield titles such as 42 Vietnam, my KDs were easily 10, 15-to-1, no problem. That was consistent every game. They weren't anomalies. It was every game you walked into, you loaded up, you knew that you were going to get first place, you knew that you were going to demolish the other team. It was just a question of by how bad were they going to get beaten. That's not the case when you load up COD. Obviously, you can offset some of those variables by bringing in friends and things like that, or adopting certain playstyles, which would be a very defensive playstyle, which encourages people, to do all sorts of nasty things and brings out the worst, in my opinion, in FPS gaming, which is camping. But when it's so easy to die, and the challenge in the game changes from learning how to kill people to essentially learning how to stay alive, then it changes that dynamic of the game, and in my opinion it takes a lot of the fun out of it. That brings me up to my third point, which would be creativity. I'm going to illustrate this in just a few moments with some pictures. So, but the creativity in the older games, like the only thing would be comparable would be, well, I guess both Quake is too. I think Battlefield would be more easily comparable. But when you have, Battlefield was a conquest style game. Quake obviously was essentially TDM. But you have to give somebody more than just several options of running around the map. If you do not give somebody several options of running around the map, like here's an example, so I'm going to bring up a photo here. This is a photo that was taken actually off the website. This clearly shows that there are basically 3 different paths to get across the map. I mean, there's no creativity there. There's no tactical, strategical decision on where to go, what to do. You have like one of 3 different ways to get yourself from point A to point B across this map. What possible genius is there going to be in a play that so limits you on your decisions at any given point? You know, in addition to that, you've got, I mean, what's with all these barrels all over the place? These barrels, and there's a lot of different names for it: head glitching, cheap shotting, being a mushroom, whatever you want to call it. You know, you got these barrels that people are like head glitching over them. You have no chance of taking a peek out and being, if there's somebody here, I'm going to avoid them and move this way, because you can't see them at all anyway. Even if you can, it doesn't matter, because you only have 2 other ways to get across the map. And fuck, when you combine that with instant respawn and and a whole skewed spawn system in general, it makes it extraordinarily difficult to make it across the map. The third component of the maps and the creativity issue would basically come down to radar. I don't know. Radar, in my opinion, is one of the single biggest skill equalizers that are out there. If you do not have to figure out where somebody is at, and you're able to know instantly whether, based on whether they're shooting their gun or where the radar is pulsing over them anyway, in my opinion, you have just completely leveled the playing field of any. There's no way. I mean, not being tunnel visioned and having this amazing map awareness, knowing where your teammates are at, knowing where your enemies are at, these are all skills that separate great players from average players. And when you no longer have to work for those skills, it's a lot easier to lump everybody in the same sort of general category. I don't know if anybody, I mean, it's kind of an old game now, but Bond 007 back in the day, I remember a lot of people loved playing that game. It was a very, very popular game on the N64. I know that's before a lot of people's time, actually, but one of the favorite modes that people had of wanting to play that was License to Kill. And the reason why everybody liked playing License to Kill was where you got, were one-shot killed, and so people liked playing with a variety of power weapons and things like that, so you just spray the hallway and it kills everybody there. The reason why people like playing like that is because it separates, well, it doesn't separate, it combines everybody, it equalizes the skill level of everyone involved. When I can no longer strafe down the hallway and, you know, take pot shots at somebody or circle strafe them and hit them more than they're hitting me, like, it just removes aim, it removes strategy, it removes creativity and map thinking, it removes all that stuff, and it gives somebody who would ordinarily be demolished a much, much better chance of coming out on top. And at the time when I was playing that, I wasn't, I don't know, I just wasn't smart or knowledgeable enough to be able to put those, you know, ducks in a row and figure out why that was, but I knew I didn't like it at the time, and I remember thinking, like, oh, these guys that we play with, you know, they always do much better when we play License to Kill, and I don't seem to be able to, you know, crap all over them like I normally do. I'm like, that's really weird. I wonder why that is. You know, and that's one of those reasons. Overall, the game basically institutes a variety of skill equalizers that level the playing field so that anybody can be, like I like the phrase, king for a day. In my opinion, the best analogy, well, the analogy I use most often, is Shaun White, who is this champion snowboarder, you know, excellent, and people can't take him down. He does great no matter where he competes. And if the solution to competing with Shaun White was to, instead of having 15-foot half-pipe walls, and then instead of making them 15 feet, lowering them to, say, 2 feet. So gives everybody a much better shot of being able to compete with Shaun White now that you can't pick up anywhere near as much speed or get nearly the height, because now you have 2 feet walls. So he's no longer getting 40, 50 feet of air on a jump. He's now getting like 5 or 6 like everybody else, and it's that much harder to differentiate yourself out there when you're competing. And that's exactly what COD does. There's no way. It is very, very, very difficult to differentiate yourself at all, but the key word is not at all. The key word would be on a consistent basis. A great player will do better than somebody else, but it doesn't mean anything if even great players are number one. Their scores are so close to what a bad player's score is, and if even those great players are also not getting, if they aren't consistently getting a 30-40 kill streak every game, if they're doing that, bouncing back and forth from a 30 kill streak to barely going positive, and they're only barely able to keep their 3-1 KD, maybe edging closer to a 4-1 with a high score per minute, is something. I mean, I feel like it speaks for itself. If that's that's why the game is so popular. It wasn't fun for people to load up into a game and know that they had little to no way to deal with someone else they were going up against. That they were going to load in, and the only way they were going to win that day was the hope that somebody was not better than they were. And people don't like that. They want to load in and have a decent chance of doing well. And when you spawn in, instantly every time after you die, and there's no downtime, and the early COD had Frag X3, but you get to do all sorts of goofy stuff like spawn in now, throw down your claymores, throw down your Dancing Betties, set up shop in a corner, camp out, and that's what people seem to love. Gives everybody an equal shot of, like I said, being king for a day. The last point I want to close with is quickly the play styles. One of the things that made me so successful in early games such as Quake and Battlefield was having a very aggressive play style. And while there are people that play more aggressively than not in COD, it is not possible to play COD aggressively, I guess, in the same line of thinking you would have played an older game aggressively. You cannot, there is no amount of strafing, there is no amount of tactical decision that you can make when you look down one of 3 alleyways and you see multiple barrels there. There's nothing you can do. There is no aggressive play that is possible to move you down there. Oftentimes back in the day it was possible because guns didn't shoot as fast and kill as fast. It was possible to know that somebody was around a certain corner, anticipate that you were going to get the jump on them because you're going to be playing aggressively, but that you will take a shot in the process, but know that despite the fact that you're taking damage, you will be getting that kill and you will be capping that flag. Nothing like that is possible in COD because of the amount of head glitching barrels and things like that around the environment, the verticality, especially when you're playing on console, and obviously all sorts of things like bouncing betties, claymores, etc., etc. You are far, far, far more successful with this defensive style play. I think the best you can hope for would be like this aggressive, aggressive, what is the word? I want to say camper. Essentially somebody who plays an aggressive defensive position, somewhere in the middle. You push forward, you try to spawn camp, you play very conservatively. That is the best you can hope for. There is no aggressive gameplay because you are severely punished for it. When you limit any one style of play, like I said, it goes back to my earlier point on creativity, and it just blows it out of the water, and you funnel everyone not only down one of several ways across the map, but you're funneling them into similar ways of playing. It stifles creativity, it kills consistency, and in my opinion takes the fun out of the game. And somebody like myself who was extremely successful, won multiple tournaments, won online tournaments, did everything there was to do in the avenue of FPS competitive gaming, but it's not good enough today. Today it's not good enough. There is no way that any of those skills, any of that knowledge, none of that translates over into COD whatsoever. So those are my thoughts on COD, why it's frustrating, and why it is the game it is today. Because to a great player it may be frustrating, But I think to many, many players, it's something that's fantastic because it allows them to stand on an equal playing field as someone who would have pooped all over them several years ago. Woo! That was a mouthful. As always, comments, criticisms, critiques, let me know what you guys think.